When we become literate in a language, we'll learn the conventions about what is called a word, and about spacing these elements in text. Who decide these conventions, and how do we learn them? Together, we will gradually get some surprising perspectives on how words are formed. Good day! I am Jeric, and this is Morphology. Syntax is defined as the set of rules or principles that govern how words are put together to form phrases or well-formed sequences of words. Almost all of the words in it have some common sense meaning independent of the study of the language. In common usage, word refers to some kind of linguistic unit. We have a rough common sense idea of what a word is, but it is surprisingly difficult to characterize precisely. We begin by looking at properties of words informally characterized and see where it leads. The subdomain of linguistics dealing with word properties, particularly word structure, is called morphology. Here, we will concentrate on just few kinds of morphological properties that will turn out to be relevant for syntax. We will briefly introduce the following basic ideas. First, words come in categories. Second, words can be made of smaller units called morphemes. Third, morphemes combine in regular rule-governed fashion. And fourth, morphemes can be silent. The first important observation about words is that they come in different kinds. This is usually stated as the fact that words come in categories, where categories are nouns, verbs, adjectives, prepositions, adverbs, determiners, complementizers, and other things. Some of these are familiar from traditional grammar, such as nouns and verbs. Others probably less so, like complementizers or determiners. In open class categories, new words can be freely created, such as nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Closed categories include prepositions, determiners, numerals, complementizers, auxiliaries, modals, coordinators, and negations or affirmations. Each of these categories will need to be defined. Say, for example, there are many different subcategories of verbs, some of which are distinguished in the dictionary, like transitive, intransitive, and so on. Most dictionaries do not specify refinements of the other categories, but they are needed there too. Say, for example, there are many different kinds of adverbs, like manner adverbs, degree adverbs, frequency adverbs, and modal adverbs. Notice also that the degree adverb to in "this is too spicy" is not the same word as the affirmative to in "that is too," which was mentioned. Similarly, the complementizer for in "for you to eat it would be a mistake" is often distinguished from the preposition for in "he cooked it for me." Remember that there are even important distinctions among the determiners, like articles, demonstratives, and quantifiers. In fact, there are important subcategories in all of the categories mentioned. This classification of words into categories raises the fundamental questions. 1. What are these categories? That is, what is the fundamental basis for the distinctions between categories? Second, how do we know that a particular word belongs to a particular category? Traditionally, the categories mentioned above are identified by semantic criteria. That is, by criteria having to do with what the words mean. Noun is sometimes said to be the name of a person, a thing, or a place. A verb is said to be the name of an action. Adjective is the name of a quality, and others. There is some truth underlying these criteria, and they can be useful. However, a simple-minded application of these criteria is not always reliable or possible. Sometimes, words have no discernible meaning. Say, for example, the complementizer that. Nouns can name actions, as in Bill's the repeated betrayal of his friends. Verbs and adjectives can denote states, like John fears storms. John is fearful of storms. It is more important to keep meaning in mind as a guide, but in many cases, we will need more reliable criteria. The most fundamental idea we will use is this one. A category is a set of expressions that all behave the same way in the language. And the fundamental evidence for claims about how a word behaves is the distribution of words in the language. And where would they produce nonsense or some other kind of deviance? In morphology, the simplest meaningful units, the semantic atoms, are often called morphemes. Meaning in this characterization can be taken either to be paraphrasable by an idea, such as the plural morpheme, which stands for the idea of plurality. But it can also be indicating a grammatical property, such as accusative case, ending in Latin or Japanese, such as Japanese O, which marks a direct object. Then, a distinction is often drawn between morphemes which can occur independently, which are called free morphemes, and those that can only appear attached or inside of other element, which are bound morphemes or affixes. Affixes that are attached at the end of the word is called suffixes. At the beginning of the word are called prefixes. Inside the word are infixes. At the beginning and end, circumfixes. We should all know that words can have more than one morpheme in them. Say for example, English can express the idea that we are talking about plurality of objects by adding the sounds z and is at the end of a certain words. Book becomes books. Table becomes tables. Friend becomes friends. And rose becomes roses. Nouns can do this in English. The ability to be pluralized comes close to being a distinctive property of nouns. If a noun can be pluralized, it is a noun. Notice that the characterization of this suffix is partly semantic. So, for example, we know that the sound at the end of reads in the following sentence is not the plural affix, but some kind of agreement marker in the sentence. She reads the newspaper. This fits the idea that S is a semantic atom, a meaningful unit that has no other meaningful units as parts. We can see that there is no plural version of any verb, or of any preposition, or of any adjective. If a word can be pluralized, then it is a noun. The reverse does not always hold. That is, there are some nouns which cannot be pluralized, such as the so-called mass nouns like furniture or milk. For these mass nouns, some other diagnostic property must be found to decide whether or not they are nouns. We will also need some diagnostic that lets us conclude that mass nouns and count nouns are indeed nouns, do indeed belong to the same superclass. As for the pluralizing test, it only serves to identify a subclass of nouns, namely the count nouns. Other affixes speak out other kinds of categories. English can modify the way in which a verb describes the timing of an action by adding affixes, like I dance, I danced, I am dancing. In English, only verbs can have the past tense or progressive affixes. That is, if a word has a past or progressive affix, it is a verb. Again, it is important to notice that there are some other ing affixes, such as the one that lets a verb phrase become a subject or object of a sentence, like in the sentence, he is liking anchovies a lot. Clearly, in this last example, the ing does not express the liking of anchovies. It's going on now as we speak. Going back to the progressive ing, note that although even the most irregular verbs of English have ing forms, like being, having, and doing, some verbs sound very odd in progressive constructions. Like in the sentence, it is okay to say that he is liking you a lot, but not she is knowing the answer. Should we conclude that like or know are not verbs? No. This situation is similar to the situation we encountered earlier when we saw that some nouns did not pluralize. This kind of situation holds quite frequently. Remember the slogan, negative results are usually uninformative. The reason is that we do not know where the failure comes from. It could be due to factors having nothing to do with what we are investigating. Surprisingly, the categorization of words that is relevant for affixation is also relevant for simply determining where the word can appear, even without affixes, a syntactic property. Consequently, we can use considerations about where a word appears to help determine its category. Suppose we try to plug in single words in this slot. Certain choices of words will yield well-formed English phrases, others will not. It is okay to plug in the words interesting, valuable, linguistic, but not John, slept, carefully, for. This frame only allows adjectives in space, but not all adjectives can appear there. Say for example, we cannot put alleged or fake there. One property that some nouns have is that they can appear in a slot following a determiner such as the. The blank is here. It's okay to plug in book, milk, furniture, but not the words big, grow, and very. As another example, the following context seems to only allow single words only if there are verbs. When will John blank? Here is an example of a context in which we could be misled. John is blank. It's okay to plug in nice, president, or presidents, but not the word nicest. Both nice and president can occur, but president, unlike nice, can be pluralized. So nice is an adjective, while president is a noun. We must be careful. This context allows both adjectives and nouns and other things too. The possibility of occurring in a frame like the ones listed here is a very simple distributional property, and it can help us classify words into categories that will be relevant to syntax and morphology. In morphology, we will see that affixes are sensitive to category. Compounding is also sensitive to category. Why should the possibility of having a certain affix correlate with the possibility of occurring on a certain frame? We will get some insight into fundamental questions like this in the next topics. The options for modification provide another way to identify the categories that are relevant for both word formation or morphology and phrase formation or syntax. Here, we use a mix of semantic and syntactic factors to figure out what modifies what in a familiar way. Let's take a look on the category, the modifier, and the examples given. For example, we can observe that the following sentence allows a modifier to be introduced. John was shooting. John was shooting accurately. Assume we have independently established that accurately is an adverb. Since shooting accurately is a way of shooting, we can conclude that in this sentence, shooting is a verb. Similarly, in the example, I resent any unnecessary shooting of lions. We conclude from the fact that unnecessary is an adjective, and from the fact that an unnecessary shooting is a type of shooting, that in this sentence, shooting is a verb. The reverse may hold true. John shot. John shot accurately. Since shot is the past tense of shoot, we know that shot is a verb in this sentence. Since accurately modifies it, we may conclude that accurately is an adverb. Another perhaps more surprising kind of evidence for two words having the same category is available when the two words have complementary distribution, by which we mean that in a given context either one of two elements may occur but not both. This is a good indication but certainly not foolproof that these two items are of the same category. Say for example in the frame, blank books, only certain words can occur. It's okay to say the word the and these, but not the words the this or these the. We see that the and these are in complementary distribution. If one appears, the other cannot. This is evidence that they are both in the same category. And in this case, it is the category we call determiners. On the other hand, it's okay to say the book, blue books, the blue books. So, we see that the and blue are not in complementary distribution, and nothing much follows from this. Like our other test for category, this one is not foolproof. Consider the example on this data. It is okay to say John's book, but not the John's book and John's the book. We see that the and John's are in complementary distribution, but later we will provide reasons to reject the view that they are the same category. Something slightly more complicated explains the complementary distribution in this case. Note, however, that meaning can be a guide here. John's expresses a kind of meaning that seems quite unlike the meaning expressed by the or these. We defined a morpheme as a semantic atom. It has no meaningful subparts. For our purposes here, this will be a good enough approximation, but we should be aware that there are many questions lurking in the background. Say for example, there exist some morphemes which do not seem to have a meaning attached to them. A word will be called complex if it contains more than one of these atoms. The part of a word that an affix attaches to is called a stem, and the root of the word is what you start with before any affixes have been added. Compared to most of the world's languages, English morphology is not very rich, but it has prefixes. Like in the examples pre-test, post-test, ex-husband, disappear, unqualified, rethink, inaccurate. It has suffixes like test, tested, testable, nationalization. Also, it seems to have few infixes like fun fucking tastic means really fantastic, and edumacation, ghetto speak for education. Apparently, many other languages also have infixes. Say for example, in Tagalog, a language spoken in the Philippines by some 10 million speakers, one use of is illustrated by forms like this. Mabuti, which means good. Bumuti, become good. Malaki, big. Lumaki, get big or grow. Matanda, old. Tumanda, get old age. English also seems to lack circumfixes, which we seem to find, for example, in Dutch participles, which use the circumfix ge and z. For example, je genereerd, as in generated, je worked, je hoard, or heard. English does have some verb forms exhibiting sound changes in the base, like run, ran, swim, swam, come, came, meet, met, speak, spoke, choose, chose, write, and wrote. But other languages like the Semitic languages like Arabic and Hebrew make much heavier and more regular use of this kind of change. For example, in Arabic, the language of some 250 million speakers, kalbun is heart, kulubun, hearts, najmun, star, nujumun, stars, kalbun, dog, kilabun, dogs. English also have some affixes which are suprasegmental, which means applying prosodic changes like stress shift above the level of the linguistic segments. The phonemes permit, permit, record, record. English does not have regular reduplication in its morphology, or the repetition of all part of a word. But many of the world's languages do. Say for example in Agta, another Philippine language spoken by several hundred people, tak-ke means leg, tak-tak-ke means legs, ulo means head, ululuda means heads, magsado means leak, magsadsado means leak in many places. Although there are many kinds of affixes, we find that they have some properties in common across languages. Morphology addresses the many questions that come up about these linguistic units. What kind of affixes are there? What kind occur in English? What are their combinatory properties? Do complex words have any form of internal organization? The Oxford English Dictionary has an entry for the following word. Denationalization means the action of denationalizing or the condition of being denationalized. This word is not very common, but it is not extremely rare either. People with a college education or regular readers of the newspapers are likely to be familiar with it. But even a speaker who is not familiar with the word is likely to recognize that it is a possible word and can even make a good guess about what it means. How is this possible? We can identify 5 basic and familiar building blocks, 5 morphemes in this word. Denationalization. The word nation is a free morpheme, and we can see that it is a noun, since it can be modified by adjectives, and it can bear plural morphology. The meaning of this word is built progressively from the meaning of its part. National characterizes a property that a nation can have. Nationalize means make national. Denationalize means undo denationalizing. Denationalization is the process or the result of denationalizing. This property is called compositionality. Roughly, it means that meaning of parts is progressively computed by general rules, so that once that we have computed the meaning of, say, nationalize, nationalization is just going to add meaning of Asian, whatever that is, to the already computed meaning of nationalize by a general rule of meaning combination. For example, in general, we do not expect denationalize to mean undo a personalization, as in the word depersonalization. Sometimes, this rule governed behavior fails and we have an idiom. Thus, a blueberry is not a berry that is blue. In such case, it seems that we still have 2 morphemes, blue and berry, but their meaning is idiomatic. That is, do not conform to the general rules of meaning combination. When we look closely, the situation seems even more remarkable. There are 120 different orderings of these 5 morphemes, but only this one forms a word. That's a lot of possible orders, but somehow, speakers of English are able to recognize the only ordering that the language allows. That is, we claim a speaker of English, even one who is unfamiliar with this word, will only accept one of these sequences as a possible English word. What explains the fact that English speakers only accept one of these possible orderings? First, it cannot be simply be memorization, like having encountered denationalization but none of the others, since we assume that the speakers are unfamiliar with this word. If they are familiar with it, we could try another one, even a non-existing word. Our theory is that English speakers and speakers of other human languages know some regularities about word formation. What are the regularities that a speaker needs to know in order to accept denationalization and reject the other 119 forms? First, the speaker needs to know each of the 5 morphemes: de, nation, al, eyes, and Asian. Second, the speaker needs to know what kind of morpheme each one is. Is it free? If not, then is it a prefix, suffix, etc.? It is okay to say national, but not all nation, since al is a suffix. It's okay to say pre-test, but not test, pre, since pre is a prefix. This is something which, by convention, we often indicate with preceding or following hyphens, as we have done here. Number 3. Since an affix is a morpheme that is not complete, it must attach to something. Let's call the thing it needs a complement. So the speaker needs to know what kind of thing the affix can attach to, what kind of complement it requires. Say for example, it's okay to say nationalize or symbolize, but not speakize or inize. The ize suffix combines with adjectives or nouns of a certain kind, but not with verbs or prepositions. This property is called C-selection for category selection. The affix ize needs to combine with a certain category, namely adjective or noun. This is actually the property that we used earlier with the past tense or the progressive suffix to determine membership to the category verb. They C-select verb. There may be other kinds of selection too, as we will see on the next chapters. Number 4. The speaker knows that affixes must combine with something next to it, something adjacent. Say for example, it is only slightly odd to say that some territory or others should nationalize, meaning become a nation. But it is impossible to combine eyes with nation after nation has already combined with all. It's okay to say nation, nationize, national, nationalize, but not nation is all. We cannot pair up all with nation after eyes has attached in this way. Number 5. The speaker needs to know what kind of thing results from combining an affix with a complement in order to know what the result is allowed to combine next with. National is an adjective, since al turns a noun into an adjective. Nationalize is a verb, since eyes turns an adjective into a verb. How do we know national is an adjective? If we have established the eyes generally suffixes to adjectives, one reason is that eyes can suffix to it. But there are of course other reasons. The other tests mentioned converge on this conclusion. In sum, a speaker who knows the following things will only find one analysis of nationalization. Try to look at these examples. We will call this kind of specification of these basic properties of morphemes the lexical entries. We will elaborate our lexical entries in various ways as we proceed. Notice that the third column of the entries above the specification of what the affixes select is only approximate. It is true that all can combine with noun nation to form an adjective national, but this affix cannot select just any noun. Say for example, it's okay to say neighborhood but not neighborhoodal, or we can say honesty but not honestial. It appears that this suffix will only attach to nouns that are either simple roots, that is atomic nouns, nouns that have no morphological part, or else nouns that end in ion, ment, or. Say for example in the words natural, relational, environmental, majoral, seasonal, exceptional, fundamental, and behavioral. We see that AL is very particular about which nouns it can select. It selects roots and non-roots, but only certain ones, so our lexical entry for this suffix needs to be augmented, and it is not clear how to specify its requirements exactly. One proposal is that nouns ending in ion or and ment are in a special family of Latinate nouns, and these are what are selected. Adopting this view, we could say AL is a suffix which C selects noun to form an adjective. Rather than name the families of nouns, in this way we will simply annotate our entries with a range of accepted kinds of nouns. Like, AL is a suffix which C selects noun to form an adjective. Surveying the suffixes in English finds that a number of them have special Latinate requirements, as seen in the following examples. Also, other suffixes only select roots. And some English suffixes select a range of root and non-root forms. The whole collection of knowledge that a speaker has about the morphemes, the collection of lexical entries, is called a lexicon. It will contain information about morphemes of the sorts shown here and more. We can think of the lexicon as the place in memory where all this information is stored. If our description is correct, the lexicon is a mental storage area of some sort in which information about morphemes and perhaps other things are found. I hope you had a great time learning with me. Again, this is Jeric, and thank you for watching.